Hi, everybody. Hello. So I'll introduce myself. I'm Isabelle Reusa. I come from a cultural and digital background, and I started working on a project for French National Museums in 2012, and it was about rethinking the distribution of a big image fund. So that was a bit of a media project, and on the occasion of that project, that's when I started developing a slight obsession with APIs, and now work as a independent consultant with the culture and media companies. I also work with startups on any kind of innovation process. And I've also launched a couple of meetups, one in Paris where I work and where I live. It's called API.culture, and it's aimed at the cultural industry, the cultural sector, private and public, to try and make them understand how APIs can be great for them. And also I've launched a media meetup. It's a closed one with Radio France, and it gathers a few big media institutions in France. And I'm also this year involved in the API Days, which is another event in Paris around APIs. It will take place in December 11 and 12th in Paris this year. And I'm working on programming the event. So today I'm going to talk to you about media APIs. So why do I think they matter? It started off just about a year ago, so I started working with Radio France. So Radio France is the national radio operator. The previous speaker just mentioned NPR. So NPR is in the US, and Radio France is in France. And they've got this open API project, and they had questions about how they should position the APIs. So I did a survey for them. I did a twofold mission. The first one was a survey about, what other media APIs there were around. And the second part, which is not the subject today, but which was quite a lot of fun, was conducting workshops. And they were design thinking workshop. And we did some creation of, trying to understand use cases where Radio France contents might be used and consumed in other environments. So when I did this survey, I thought it would be quite interesting to share, because there were not many things that I found, out there in the open about media APIs. There's a lot of technical documentation, but not much or nothing about strategy. So why do API matters? Well, first of all, why media matter. Just a very quick reminder. Media are a very important piece in our society because they allow for independent opinion. They are counterpowers to power in place or to big companies or any sort of economical or any sort of strong power. They give voice to, other people. And also, it's not just voices being expressed. The media, they have ethics and processes, and it's a very ancient craft. So whenever they give voice to someone, whenever they say something, if Le Monde or the Washington Post says something, it's not exactly like when you and I are tweeting something. It's been verified or it's been put into context. So let's never forget, in those shaken times of fake news and stuff, that the media are really one of the cornerstones of our democracies. And so the media today, their context is really that in the past few years, you might be aware of that, but they've been experiencing a loss in their advertising revenue, which was the main model. It was printed on paper and sold with a paper. It helped financing it. They've lost that when they went digital. At least it's worked less well. And they've been now extremely dependent on big platforms, namely Facebook. They try their best to be visible on Facebook, but Facebook keeps, toying. They feel like Facebook toys around with the feed. And also all these platforms and even Google and stuff, they've been eating away the advertising revenue. And also the media suffer from something which we call disintermediation, which is a bit of their fault because they've been sending out, content through RSS feeds for years, but whenever people reuse things, the media don't know what's being done with, their content, in what, by whom, in what context. They have no clue. And also, people have taken the use of just grabbing their stuff and reusing it. So really, the media have been losing control or have not gained the control they could have. So, there might be hope in media APIs, but more fundamentally, why do media APIs make sense to me? Because whatever the media may be, they issue qualified content. As I said, they say what has been said, it's dated, it's put into context, people are quoted, it's very, very specific. And the information is really structured. You've got dates, you've got metadata, whether it's business or arts or, anything. And something, and it's getting even more interesting there, is that the media issue content in natural language. And you might see where I'm getting at. And even better than that, but TV and radio are issuing conversational format, language. And they also have content in very, very big historical depth. Some ancient, media that have been there around for a long time can have online decades of news, decades of content, sometimes well beyond the 20th century. So this, has huge value if you think of it, just, naming that. And if those contents were open, through open APIs, or at least through APIs to widely open, it would allow for new usage. I'm thinking, for instance, fact-checking, which is a very big deal now. Newspapers have been collaborating a lot over that. There are fact-checking agencies that are set up, and who else, needs more to get into, to dive into content really widely and really freely, those fact-checking companies. So that's an example of what, could be done. They could also, by spreading out their content through, APIs, find new audiences, because they would, obviously put their content out through other platforms and other media, platforms that would become a media in turn. And they could also try and develop new business models, which they are in great need of. So the survey which I did, I thought when I started that there are two main things I wanted to do. Is first go out and see what open APIs I could find, and also I thought I would interview experts in the media and experts outside the media. And it happened that it was not so easy. There's no clear path there. Finding APIs. I don't know if any of you in the room has done market survey on APIs in any sort of field, but it's not very easy. So we've got tools like programmable web and that sort of tools. They're extremely useful. But in the end, you find yourself, you need to go look at the documentation. And, in the end, I just typed in media URLs and looked for subdomains and see if one started with API dot something or developer dot something. So that was quite time-consuming. It was quite interesting. Very often, I didn't find anything, even in pure player media. That was a big learning. They're media, they're pure player, they're digital. You think they'll have APIs. They're not even API first. They don't even have open APIs or visible. And sometimes it's partner APIs. And when it's smarter, very often you just get an error message. You don't even have a page title nor anything. And as far as talking to experts came, it was not easy either, because few people in their job titles on LinkedIn have API or in their job description, either because it's just API teams, they are across the organization, they are not really identifiable, and try to go up the management to talk strategy, business, revenue models, all that type of thing is extremely difficult. So it was not an easy task, but I'll share with you what I found. Oh, one last thing. So the perimeter of that study is what's called legacy media. It's like the good old media we trust and like. So it's newspapers and radio, TV I won't talk about today because it's quite different. It's quite a special field I found API-wise, and also press agencies and photo agencies. So today, the media broadcast their content in their own environment. They're very often very digital. They've got apps, websites. It's amazing, but it's silos. We know that well here at Nordic APIs. They publish them through platforms. So obviously, you know, Facebook, and it's a big, big problem with them. And they also broadcast through partnerships. And that's something interesting I found, is that they don't feel very comfortable sometimes with those partnerships. For instance, now in France, when you buy a new mobile internet bundle, you've got access to lots of free press, like pretty much everything you can read for free. So, you know, where's the business model there? And something I found extremely interesting is that when I talked to some of them sometimes, I said, why don't you open up open APIs? And they said something like, well, you know, when you open an API, the idea is that people are going to develop their own stuff around your content, around your API. But, you know, in partnerships, it's always the weakest partner which will have to do the job. And in the end, it's very often us, because often in partnerships, we are the weakest part. So I thought that was quite an interesting point of view, surprising. So they have this thing, you know, which I found. And obviously, so they've been using RSS feeds, which is also a reason why some of them say, why would we need APIs? We already have RSS, you know, we broadcast our content. And they obviously use web services with their partners. So there are APIs. Actually, you know, most of them web services, you know, APIs, they have some, but they are usually partner APIs and very few open ones. So that was, you know, the landscape sort of thing. So what I found very interesting is that those who have open APIs, like the ones you can come to, you know, read the documentation, have an idea of what it is, all of them say, definitely do an API. They are fundamental to us. We all know that. I'll be very quick, because it allows you to recruit not only developers, but, you know, partners, because they can come and see what you have and see what interests them. It pushes you, you know, towards excellence, because you need to document, you need to eat your own dog food, and all that things we know very well. It helps them innovate inside, internally, because they can run hackathons, they can do POCs, proof of concept. But also, the ones that had open API talked about this negotiation thing again. And they said, now that we have an open API, when we go see any big partner, whether it's Facebook or anyone, before we meet the first time, they've read our documentation, they know what's in our API, they know what they can get, they know the conditions, and now they never ask us to develop anything. Never. It just doesn't happen. So that's a big finding which I did not expect, that it gives them power. Another very important thing for media today, it's all these huge masses of information which we've seen are a dream come true for artificial intelligence companies. They all want to plug in, either in press, in written content, or in audio content, or for images and video. They can train on natural language, they can train on conversation. You know, conversation training is extremely important. Radio content is amazing, because you can hear conversation, which us humans understand. Someone talks, a reply, talk, reply, and then there's a reply about something that was said like 5 sentences before. We totally perfectly understand. Chatbots find it very difficult to, you know, put that into context. So it's extremely good content to train on. Image recognition is very useful for AI companies, and anything that allows them to train on how to extract information and estimate the relevance of the content they've identified. On the other hand, artificial intelligence will bring an enormous asset for the media industry. Have you ever thought that the internet, which we search every day, has got text and images? You know, images, we're happy or not about the way they are indexed in search engines. But audio content is not on the web at all. But thanks to speech-to-text technology, it can now be put back into the web and searchable. Written content can be enjoyed through your vocal assistant or CarPlay when it's ready. And also AI will allow for on-the-fly translation of content, captioning of video, and basically any accessibility issue. It will bring media the ability to index better their image database and sound database and everything. But basically, it will allow them to add a layer of service on top of their content. And some of them, for instance, Getty Image, the big photo agency, has even understood that their image base, which they sell, you know, for any one of us who need images, can also have a new usage, and they sell access to Google and anyone working on self-driving cars that need to train their bots to recognize a running dog or a jumping child or whatever. So they actually are developing new business segments out of this. And just to finish, a few models of strategy around media APIs. There are two. One that I've called the Guardian model. It's also the model of, for instance, NPR. It's any general media that can talk about, you know, pretty much anything. It's the common, nice, generous API. You can come, have a look at the content, make calls, see, get what you want to get. It's a click to accept deal. You can have commercial or non-commercial deals and even do revenue share with some of them. And what I found talking to the media that have that is that it's not really the way they actually do business. They say it's extremely important for the reasons we've said, it gives them power in negotiation, it makes them better. But really, it's to them, their feeling is that it's not a business drive, really. There's another model which I find the most interesting. It's the Financial Times model. It's for specialist media. The Financial Times and Reuters Thomson, the press agency, and it's true also for Getty Image. They are very specialized. Some in finance, some in images. They are very niche. And they have APIs that are seen to me as, a mean for third parties to integrate the content as a business fuel. It can be integrated into the people's workflows. So they sell it not only as a piece of news, what's new about that subject, but as access to a database. And they've got tiered offers, for instance, the Financial Times, and the highest offer even allows partners to get into all the content, the metadata, the full content, and do the data mining they need to do. So there's a big business strategy apparently behind that. And I thought that was the most promising. And there are also other things which I found out, which I find interesting, is the video, which I call the portable model, is that whenever you send a video somewhere through an API, the video comes with advertising, usually in the beginning. So it's sort of a portable business model. You just need to get the clicks, count, and it's very easy. Obviously, one of the models that the media can use with APIs is subscription to their large content base, and they can add to that freemium models. And they can also value their peripheral data, all the metadata they have developed that they're not using as such, but that can be extremely valuable for other industries. For instance, Spotify could be really interested in a radio metadata that they have, over the years. They can have playlists, like Spotify is quite young. Some radios can have data going back decades, so it can be extremely interesting. And another model, which is quite unique, but some media are developing that, it's that they have decoupled the production of information from business revenue. So, for instance, they can be organizing tech events like this one, or they can be running small ads. So they've got these lucrative things, and these lucrative segments can be also fueled with the data, with the contents they have and the expertise they have. So basically my conclusion is that There are APIs in the media. I have a sense that it could be more developed, and I think it should. And I say definitely media go the open API way. So thank you, and I'll be extremely happy to answer any questions. And also I've seen that there are Rafal and Nathan from the BBC, I think they're around there. They'll be talking this afternoon. So if there's anyone from the media in the room, I'd be so glad to get more insight from you too as well. Thank you.